Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another really cool arcade game video for you this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about this one because it's got an incredible story, but this is Atari's Tetris arcade game. You may have not even known that there was a Tetris arcade game, but there was, and Atari made it, and we've got one. But I've also got props. So I'm going to show you some interesting things, and we'll talk about video game history a little bit because this is just a fascinating story if you've never heard it. This is actually in a Paperboy cabinet. So this game originally was a Paperboy. Now we did a video not too long ago with the same exact thing, but it was an Atari Road Riot that had been kitted into a Paperboy cabinet. So if you don't know, I'll go over it really quick because most people do know. Back in the day, a lot of times whenever they sold a new arcade game, they would sell just the pieces to make an older arcade game the new game. So when they sold Tetris, most of them that were sold were just a kit. So it was a couple pieces of side art, a control panel overlay, a new game board, some artwork, you know, the sign for the top, and you could put it in whatever cabinet you wanted. So whatever operator had this had an old Paperboy arcade game that wasn't making any money anymore. It was about 1988. And they bought this Tetris kit and installed it in their Paperboy arcade game. Did a damn good job. It looks really good. If you did not know this was a Paperboy originally, you may not, you know, if you're not really into arcade games, you may not know that this isn't the original cabinet, and it's an Atari cabinet with an Atari kit in it, you know, so it's even closer. Personally, I would never turn this thing back into a Paperboy. I'd just leave it a Tetris, but Paperboys are very sought after, so someone may buy this and turn it back into a Paperboy arcade game. I'd leave it exactly how it is. The thing looks beautiful, in my opinion. But before we play it, and before I show you all the art, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Atari's history with this game and before this game. So we're going to start way back when the Atari 2600 came out. So that came out in the late 70s, and you know, everybody remembers the original Atari system, and it was awesome, right? So here's one of the games for it. So this is one of Atari's actual games. Remember, they had their arcade version of Missile Command. It was their design. You see the Atari logo on it. It says Label, Program, and Audiovisual 1981 Atari Inc. Okay, so Atari was making their own arcade games and then making home games for the Atari 2600 console. And you know, they were kind of pioneers in it. Now there were other consoles before that, but the Atari was the first really popular one that made a ton of freaking money. So they were making so much money they couldn't even spend it all, right? But when they designed the system, all of the chips inside of an Atari you can buy off the shelf. None of them are something that Atari designed themselves. So you could make a copy of the system using chips that you just bought off the shelf that played Atari games, or you could make an Atari game that played on the console without interfering with any of Atari's copyrights. So Atari had a bunch of people working for them and designing games, and they didn't pay their designers very well. So a lot of the designers got all pissed off and left and started their own company. So the company that they started was Activision. Right? So look what this says. Activision presents Laser Blast, and then it says, conceived and designed by David Crane for enjoyment on your Atari video computer system. So notice they named the designer, right? That was kind of their big beef. They were really mad that a game like Missile Command, and I don't know about Missile Command specifically, but a lot of games they would sell 2 million copies or whatever, or 10 million copies, whatever, and Atari wouldn't even really give them a bonus or anything. You were just getting your regular paycheck, you know, and that really upset a lot of the designers. So they formed their own company, Activision, and in general made better games than the guys that were working at Atari. I don't know about this one, but so they did not license this. They just made it. Okay, so it's kind of hard to understand what I'm talking about, but if you had an Atari, these were the games that Atari was making for the Atari. Well, the guys that were making the games left Atari and just started making their own games that played on the Atari. And Atari tried to sue them over it, but they lost because they weren't inflicting on their copyright at all. It would be like if you I don't know what a good analogy would be. I probably should have thought of one before we started talking, but you know, if somebody designs like a board game, and then you build a little box that the board game will sit on really nice, as long as you don't use their artwork or anything, you're not really infringing upon their copyright. You're just making something that works with it. Well, that's what this was. There's nothing in this. There's nothing in this cartridge that Atari has any kind of copyright on. And if you look, the case is even different. See how they purposefully made it different than the Atari design? It's just different enough that they're not even infringing upon their label or anything. Right? I mean, it's completely different. It just happens to work in the Atari system. And they said on here, on your Atari video computer system, and then there's a trademark, right? Completely legal. Atari couldn't do anything about it, right? So as soon as Activision got away with it and won some court case that kind of set the precedent, tons of other companies started doing it. So one of them was Parker Brothers. So Parker Brothers licensed the Frogger arcade game that Sega, and I don't know if Sega had the license, a little piece of the labels here I could tell you. I don't know if Sega was the original owner of Frogger, or if it was Konami or who, but anyway, so Parker Brothers licensed the Frogger game, which was an awesome arcade game, you know, made a completely different cartridge that looks different, and it worked on your Atari, right? And so now everybody's doing it, and they're just piling on. So when I was a kid, I always liked the way these were. The Magic, same thing. They're not paying Atari a penny, right? They're just making their own games that work in the Atari. They're just basically screwing Atari over, right? But Atari kind of started it because they weren't paying the Activision guys any money when they were working there, right? So even Coleco, which was making the competing ColecoVision system, was making their own games. Coleco that work in an Atari, right? They weren't paying Atari a penny. And so they teamed up with Nintendo on a few games. So they made Donkey Kong. I don't know. This may have been the only one that wasn't licensed. I don't know. But so they made Donkey Kong and did not give Atari any money for it. What are you going to do? Right? So Nintendo, through Coleco, is making games that work on the Atari and not paying Atari a freaking penny. And by the time that the Atari 5200 came out, they were still doing it. So on this one, they're teaming up with Parker Brothers. Let's look what it says right here. It says 1983 King Features Syndicate, which was, you know, who owned the Popeye license. 1983 Nintendo of America Inc. Popeye is a registered trademark of and is licensed by King Features Syndicate Inc. Program, content, and label design 1983 Parker Brothers, Beverly, Massachusetts. So what does this not say on it? Atari. That's because Atari wasn't getting no money from this, right? So that's the way it was rolling with Atari. So the mid-'80s come around, and Atari, Nintendo puts out their home system, the NES, right? So this is the board from inside a Nintendo. This one's screwed up, obviously. And when Nintendo designed their little board, they put this little chip right here on it. And that chip has a little piece of code in it that basically makes it where if this game isn't licensed, that chip won't allow this game to play on the Nintendo. That's one of the reasons that your Nintendo back in the day would, you know, the screen would blink and stuff and mess up. It's because basically the game cartridge wasn't making a good enough contact, so this little chip was saying, that's not even a Nintendo game, don't play that crap. So one of the ways that you fix that to keep it from blinking is you can disable that chip by cutting a little pin off of it, right? So this is going on in the mid-'80s. So along comes Atari. So Atari's home game company that made console games was called, it's either Tengen or Tengen, T-E-N-G-E-N. And if you see, Paperboy obviously is an Atari game. That's a Paperboy arcade game. But their home company was Tengen that made it for the home systems. Copyright 1988, 1984, Tengen. '84 is when Paperboy came out in the arcades, right? So this was the 1988 version of it. And they got this company named Mindscape Inc. to make it for the NES. And they paid Nintendo and got the official Nintendo seal of quality. And look, it's licensed by Nintendo for play on the Nintendo Entertainment System. So do you see what I'm saying here? This is an example of Atari paying Nintendo for the right to make a game that plays on the Nintendo after all those years when Nintendo and other companies didn't pay Atari for the right to make games to play on the damn Atari. Right? Moving right along. So you had companies like this, Camerica. Look who it's licensed by. It's licensed by Codemasters, screw Nintendo, right? So you got companies like this making these goofy games. They're not paying Nintendo crap, right? Look, it says, made in Taiwan, design is patent pending. So in other words, they haven't even got their patent back yet. And then it's got this weird little switch on the back. And then it says, position B, use only this position if the game does not work with position A. Position A. So you could change this little lever here. So let me tell you how this works. This game sends a little voltage zap through the edge connector, and it disables that chip by throwing a little power to it, right? So by doing, that's why it has two positions, because Nintendo figured out they were doing it, changed something or whatever. And so if you switch the switch the other way, it does something a little different. But anyway, it disables that chip that can tell that that's a fake game. And by doing that, it'll play that game. Now, I think Nintendo sued them or whatever, but I think they got away with it. I don't think Nintendo won. And so people started making fake games for the Nintendo. Okay? So, meanwhile, Atari's watching. Boy, they really want to see what goes down with this, right? So they've actually licensed a few games just from is it Tengen or Tengen? Tengen. They've actually licensed a few games to actually play on the Nintendo, and they're paying for it. So they did Gauntlet 2, if you've ever seen Gauntlet 2 for the NES. They did RBI Baseball. They actually paid for the license, paid Nintendo the money, and made the game the straight up way. I think they did 3 games, okay? And they didn't want to do what this game was doing and shock the thing, because they thought that it might screw up the system, and then they would be liable for that. So they were trying to find a workaround where they could screw Nintendo, but they didn't want to screw up people's systems, because then they thought Nintendo could sue them. And at this point, Atari and Nintendo already had lawsuits flying back and forth anyway for other stuff. They had an antitrust lawsuit going on. I don't know the details of that, but so they're competition. They're fighting each other. And remember, and this is '88, so Atari's really like going downhill. They're not their home systems aren't selling. Nintendo is completely deep sixed them, right? So what they do is they decide the way they want to try to crack that chip and make a chip that they can put in their game that talks to it and makes it official, right? But they can't figure out the code and how it's made and all that. So what they do is they get in touch with the U.S. government, like the patent office or somebody, and they say, hey, we've got a lawsuit. We need the contents of that chip for our to research for our lawsuit or something like that. So the government gives them the contents of the chip. With the contents of the chip, they're able to make a chip that they put in their own games that makes it work with the Nintendo. So they release this bad boy, right? So they did several games like this. You probably remember seeing them. So this is one of them. This is Atari's label. And they're making the game work for the Nintendo. Notice there's no Nintendo seal of quality like the Paperboy game had on it, because they're not paying for it. There's a special little chip in here that makes it talk with the Nintendo, and everything's cool. Basically, they cracked Nintendo's code, right? Patent pending, made in the USA. Tengen seal of quality for play on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Blah, 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 right? So this is it. This is their masterpiece. They made a damn cartridge to Nintendo over, just like Nintendo screwed them over. You know what I mean? All right. So here's their famous RBI Baseball. Same thing. They did a bunch of them. Now they had released this as a licensed one. They'd already paid Nintendo to release this one, but they just made a bunch more and didn't pay them for it after they figured out the code. Immediately, Nintendo sues them and says, hey, that's our copyrighted code. You cracked it. That's infringing upon our copyright. Right? Nintendo sues the hell out of them. Big league, right? Okay, so into all of that, 15 minutes have passed. Into all of that comes Atari's Tetris. So Tetris, everybody's played. It's a great game. It was a hell of a fad in the late 80s. Tetris was designed by this Russian gentleman. He invented the concept of it and wanted to make a two-player puzzle game and blah, 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 blah. And he came up with Tetris, which is, you know, one of the most classic games of all time. Some people don't like it. If you're into it, though, it's awesome. So whenever they did, Atari got in touch with the guy and his representatives, and, you know, companies were involved, people were involved, and they licensed it to make it for the arcade. So they licensed and developed this arcade game, paid for it. It's their deal. You can see at the bottom of the screen there, whenever it goes back, that it says 1988 Tetris. That's why it has all of the Russian influence and all of the Russian art and everything. That's because it's a Russian-made game. Okay? So, at the same time that all this is going on, Nintendo gets in touch with, or Sega, I've got this all screwed up. Atari gets in touch with this company to work out a deal to have Nintendo make it in Japan or something like that. So they're trying to do a back deal to get Nintendo to make the, I don't know if it's the arcade version or whatever, but Sega's trying to get, Atari's trying to get in and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so Nintendo gets in touch with the Russian guy and says, did you definitely sell them the home console rights? And the Russian guy gets the Russian government involved, and they come up with the idea that, no, we only sold them the arcade right. Right? So at the same time, Atari starts developing a Tengen version of the arcade game. It's the same type of gameplay, two-player and everything. It's just like this arcade game. And they release it. Right? And all this is up in the air, and it's kind of in between. You know, Nintendo hasn't won their lawsuit against them yet about this. Atari's got an antitrust lawsuit against Nintendo. Nintendo's trying to do this reach-around thing where they get the rights to Tetris for the home console, blah, 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 blah. The Russian government decides that Atari does not have the right to make the home console. Nobody does. So Nintendo works a new deal with the guy that made the game and his company or whatever. They license it for the home system and then sue the hell out of Atari again, right? So Atari gets sued over their Tetris game that's in a cartridge like this, and gets sued over making the BS cartridges that aren't licensed. They almost immediately lose the Tetris lawsuit, and a judge rules that, yeah, they don't have the home console rights to it, and they put a stay on, or they say that all the games have to be recalled or something like that. So for about a month, they sold a version of Tetris in this cartridge. So it's kind of rare. You can get it because you know, if it's going to sell, most of them that were going to sell sold the first month. But you can get it. It's around, but it's pretty valuable, and it's definitely the hardest Tengen game to get. So Nintendo had acquired the Tetris rights. Now remember, they just screwed Atari out of the arcade version of it, right? And so Nintendo goes on to redesign it, release it for the Nintendo, release it for the Game Boy. The arcade version, which was the Atari home version, supposedly is much better. So we're going to play it here in a minute and see. The main thing is it's a two-player instead of a one-player. A little bit more time goes on. Atari loses the lawsuit about the freaking copyrighted ones, the ones that aren't licensed. And so basically, you have a situation where Nintendo is screwing over Atari legally for years. Atari tries it to Nintendo. Foot up the ass. Nintendo sues them about 3 different ways from Sunday, wins all kinds of money from them, and completely shuts the whole thing down. Moral of the story, Don't mess with Nintendo. Okay, now with all that said, back to the game. So the arcade game was Atari's baby, and it was all legal. So you got this cool side art of basically the Kremlin, I suppose, or something like it. I've got some statues. I'm not up on my Russian. I don't really know what that is supposed to symbolize. You got this sweet bezel. There was a cabaret version of this, if you've ever seen it. It's a shorter one. Very cool. There was only 150 of them made. So it's the only dedicated Tetris arcade games that were ever released. This is, of course, a kit in the upright. All right, so let's read over the instructions, then we're going to play it a little bit. Enough talking. Okay, so notice on the thing there is no up on the joystick because you can't do anything. You can't go up in Tetris, but you can go left, right, or drop. Objective: fit pieces together to build horizontal lines. Move and rotate pieces using the joystick and buttons. When a solid line is completed, it will disappear. Second player can join in at any time. We'll talk about that here in a second. Try to avoid leaving any holes in between pieces. Game ends when the block pieces stack to the top of the screen. Right? Okay, so it says second player can join in anytime. That was a big deal for operators. They loved that crap. Up until about 87, there may be a couple of, or 88, around this time. There may be, you know what, Gauntlet was different, which is also Atari. Anyway, there's just a few examples, before Gauntlet at least, of arcade games where you could join in at any time. Usually, if somebody was playing it, you had to wait till they end their game, and then you could come up and you could start a two-player game if you want to play with them, or start another one-player game, etc. To an operator, though, that's really screwed up because you're losing money the whole time that's going on. So along comes Gauntlet. Gauntlet, you can join in at any time. 4 freaking people can play it. Later on, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was awesome for this. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we'll use that one. 4 people can play. You can join in at any time. Think of the damn money, if you're an operator, that you can earn from this thing. People can walk up when the guy's on the last board and put their money in and start losing quicker than ever because they're on the last board and it's harder. But they want to play it because it's exciting that you're on the last board and blah, blah, blah. And 4 different people can do it at the same time. So to an operator, that was very attractive because you had the potential to make a fortune, just a ton of money. So this one, they went out of their way to design it so that 2 people can play and the second player can join in at any time. Very smart design. So enough talking. Let me get the tripod. We'll set it up. We'll play it a little bit. If you've played the home version, the Atari home version, then you've already played it. But we'll see what the differences are. I maybe should have mentioned that before the Atari arcade version, there were computer versions too, but I've never played most of those, so I don't know much about them. See it down at the bottom, it says 1988 Atari games. Okay, so we're going to play it a little bit. Easy, medium, or hard. Let's start with easy. Rotate and place pieces to fill lines. Great. One line filled. Filled line disappears and other lines drop. Your goal is to fill lines. All right. Probably gonna be a while before I get those back. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I used up all my straight ones right off the bat. That wasn't a good idea. There's one of them. Damn it! They're doing me wrong, y'all. I'm making a hell of a shaft for a straight one. Finally. Yeah. I wish I could get the... Let me see if I can turn up the sound. I don't know if this volume knob in here works or not. Do we have a volume anywhere? I think we're stuck where we are on the volume, people. Alright. You're just gonna have to deal with it. Let's see if I can clean any of this up. You did it! 12 lines to go to the next round. I need some straight ones. I hate to do that, but what choice do I have, people? Messed myself up there. Why not? I only need 6 more lines, people. This could happen still. Yeah. One line left, you say? You see how they're doing me? Do you see how they're doing me? Heck yeah, with the cool theme music. Screw it, I'm gonna take it. I can't wait for forever. You know, when I play it on the Nintendo, I always turn it the other way. So I'm turning the block 3 times when I'm used to turning it once. It's kind of a little weird. But if I would have learned to play it just pressing the other button, it wouldn't matter. But that, for whatever reason, that's just the button that I learned to press whenever I played it. Oh, ho, 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 ho. That was close. That was close, folks. Very close. They're doing me wrong, y'all. Messed that one up. Messed that one up. Finally got my straight one, but it's a little bit late. They're doing me wrong, y'all. They're doing me wrong. They're doing me wrong, y'all. Oh. Don't change direction. It doesn't work. Wrong way. Woo! getting tight. Oh no, wrong way. Might have messed myself up that way. Oh, yep. I blocked the tall one. I was screwed. Oh, well, we did pretty good. Press start to continue. Let's not. All right, folks, so there you have it. It's the long, sordid tale of Atari's Tetris. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure I got some of the small details wrong, and I'm positive that people will let me know in the comment section below. They never fail to. The other day, I called a power transistor a voltage regulator and caught hell. Oh, no, 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 that is not a voltage regulator. That is a power transistor. All right, so leave your comments below. Make sure to give us a thumbs up for filming the video for you with props, right? Now, by the time you see this video, we may not have this Tetris available for sale anymore. So we're not necessarily trying to sell you a game. We're just trying to make a cool video, and I think we did. But you can see all the games that we do have for sale if you're interested in one on our website. Go to lionsarcade.com. It's always up to date. I just put this one on there a few minutes ago because we just got it finished. Right? Go check out the website. Now, if you're local, you can come by and see us. We're in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is a little bit below Charlotte, North Carolina. We're in downtown Rock Hill. So swing by to see us if you'd like. But if you can't come by because you don't live anywhere near here, that's understandable. I wouldn't do that either if I didn't live anywhere near here. And if you're not going to go on our website because you don't want to buy an arcade game, either you don't have the funds right now, which is understandable, or you can't get it shipped because it costs a fortune to ship it, and sometimes that gets a little bit of a hassle. That's fine too. Just subscribe to us here on YouTube because hey, the videos are for free. Subscribe to us, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up, all that stuff that people beg you to do. And make sure to leave your comments below, and we'll see you on the next video.